Hi everyone, welcome back to Resourceful Humans. I'm your host Corey Haber, and today I have with me Drew and Jeremy. They both have recently taken the SHRM exam, and I know a lot of people are looking for some tips, suggestions on how to get prepared. So they're the experts on this, and they're going to give you some of their insight on what they experience. Thanks for coming, you guys. I think this is going to be very helpful to everyone who's preparing.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes. So first, let's just start off. Tell us what you both do currently, what your where you work, what your position is, and then tell me when you took the exam. I think that'd be helpful for everyone to know if it was pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. I mean, not post, during the pandemic.
Wishful thinking.
I was getting a little too excited there.
Well, I guess I'll start. I do everything I can to avoid COVID. And when I'm not doing that, I'm a consultant for Breakthrough HR. Let's see, that's pretty much what I do. And I do work from home. I recently took the test, SHRM, in July. Had a lot of extra time, so I spent quite a bit of time studying for it. I probably spent 3.5 months working on use the tools and everything. So it took me 3.5 months to finally get the nerve to take the test. Jeremy?
Cool. My name's Jeremy Langdon. So I've been putting off doing the SHRM exam for many years. And then last year I decided to take the plunge. I took solstice in knowing that some of my esteemed colleagues had taken the time to study and do the test as well. So I thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So that's exactly what I did. So I went down the self-study route and decided to take the online prep, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. But it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, that's for certain, and I certainly learned a lot on the way. I'm happy to proclaim that.
Good. I think that you're right in that right now, this is the time a lot of people are considering taking it because they put it off, they've been so busy, but now they're at home so much. So they are in an environment where it's easy to transition from work to studying, and I think that it will be helpful to kind of know what that was like when you're working from home too. So
Absolutely.
Why don't you start off, give us your tips. What'd you do to prepare? What did you find to be helpful? What was not helpful at all? What are things people shouldn't do when they're preparing?
You pray a lot. And sticker shock, that was the big thing. And one thing I would definitely recommend is join SHRM because you get the discount, right, Jeremy? And look for the discount. Join and wait for the savings because you do save quite a bit of money by doing that. And definitely, I went the online route like you. Buy the prep. Even though it does take you down a route that you're probably going to scratch your head, especially when you start taking the practice tests. You're going to wonder, why in the world did I do that? Didn't you run into some head scratching moments, Jeremy?
Yeah, I used to have hair before I did the SHRM exam. No, in my world, I mean, I sit in the talent domain, and so there were some areas for me that were more relevant to fill the gaps in my domain knowledge and my experience. So for me, the online prep, I tried another route. I'd got some books, I'd gone to Amazon, I'd seen some reviews, and I was like, you know what? That's cheap, I'm gonna get that. Oh, that one's decently priced too. But I'm a huge believer in you only get what you pay for. And one of the things about the SHRM online, not that we're in any way connected or receiving royalties from SHRM or anything like that, it's important to understand, who has the best knowledge to share. And when I took a look at the demo and I decided one Friday afternoon to take the plunge and I did the subscription, the useful thing with SHRM is that you can pay for it through PayPal and you can also apply for PayPal credit. So although $900 for a lot of people is a lot of money, at least then you can spread those payments out and hopefully pay it all before you start accruing interest. So that was a good idea. The second thing is, thanks to COVID, we've all spent our lives marooned in front of our PCs. And so I wanted to do some learning, not just sitting in front of the computer. So I also opted to get the text from SHRM. So I have this big, heavy 4 or 5 book set, which reiterates all the information that's online. The only thing you don't get in the books is the practice test, the practice exam, and things like that. So sometimes it's good to sit in front of a screen and cram. Other times it's good to sit in front of a book and cram. You know, take those odd moments where you're like, I've got an hour to kill here, I'm going to get the book out. And so it's good just to be able to swap that around a little bit. But the other thing about the SHRM online system is you've got a lot of options. You get the pre-test. You're able to go in and run through all 180 questions, covering all the domains that are there. And one good thing is it covers a broad body of knowledge. So before you even open a book, before you even kind of, you know, get the files out of your brain cells and think, oh, what's the answer to that? When you do the pre-test, you can see against all of the domains, people, business, organization, etc. You can see at that stage, before you even get going, what do I really know according to SHRM, and what are my gaps? What are the areas that I'm not as clear on? And I thought that was a really good thing. Caution. Not only does it tell you those things, but it can also give you a false sense of confidence. Because if you score super well in an area, you think, I don't need to look at that. I don't need to go back and look at that. I've already got it. Well, caution. Don't fall into the habit that I did to begin with, which was I ignored the domains that I'm very au fait with and very familiar with. And so my tip there would be, even in the areas where you get that good score, because remember, you're looking always to get above that 80% mark as a good knowledge base. And of course, from a scoring perspective in those domains, you always want to be aiming 80% and higher. So that's important. So don't get yourself into a false sense of security. Even test the areas that you think you already know about, because I can assure you, when it comes to all things SHRM, there are some areas that are going to catch you out. And it may be something that you already know. It's how it's phrased, the phraseology or the term that's used, because potato, all those things can be the same thing, but to somebody else, they can mean something quite different. So that's something else that I think is quite useful.
Books, how quaint. Come on, man, you save a tree. I mean, come on, man. They want to charge you another $100, $125 for those books. And you know, they're going to change the questions. I mean, they're not going to really, the books are going to be outdated in 6 months. At least that's
true.
They claim that even in the disclaimer, say, okay, these questions are going to be outdated in 6 months. They claim they're going to change the questions. And look at all the things that they've changed legally in the last few months. The questions they asked about transgender, the laws that have changed simply for that, and so some of the questions on the test had to do with that. Well, suddenly, those questions in the book are out of date. So I bring that up. You know, save a tree. don't. In my opinion, that would have been a waste of money.
Well, I think you're going to have. I get where you're coming from. I think you're going to have two different totally types of people. I mean, I think there are people like myself. I mean, of course I'd rather save a tree, but I personally am not a good retainer of knowledge with the computer as much as holding it in my hand. I guess it's just, you know, it's just a personal preference for me. I like to hold the material in my hand, and I feel like I'm retaining it a lot better than. And also, when I'm on the computer, I get distracted. I look at other stuff. So, but I think you're right. I mean, I think it's worth trying without the books. And if you feel like you can do it, you know, then do it without. Question I wanted to ask you is, do you guys know if there is a way to purchase used books? So, because like technically, once you use them, you're kind of done with it, right? Once you take the test.
There's definitely some people that are selling as merchants on Amazon doing that. The key thing in there is that if you get the books, they contain an online code. Your online code only can be used once. And so that's the flip side to that. So if you get the books are exclusive and not the same as what you would do with the online access, as you would with other textbooks and things like that. And there are people selling it on eBay and other places. But I mean, the book value, I mean, $80, $90, whatever it is, there's a lot of people that recycle that after they're done with it. Yeah. But the useful thing, and this is something that I found useful, and I'm still playing around with it today because I'm just naturally geeky when it comes to all things HR, is although we both did the SHRM CP, I've also been looking at the material for the SHRM SCP. Now, I'm not rushing in any way, shape, or form to do the SHRM SCP. I promised myself after my master's, I was done. But, you know, I got that lifelong learning bug again. And so I thought, you know what, rather than shooting for the stars, why don't we just kind of get to like 20,000 feet? And so with the SHRM CP, the body of knowledge that you get from that is great. But looking at online at some of the material that goes with the SCP is also useful because it gives you a different dimension to some of the things. And also it can change your thinking and your logical process a little bit more. So I'm still doing that today, but that's not for everybody. And of course, we all know what the pass rate is like for the SCP in comparison to the CP. I mean, what, barely 52% of people pass the SCP. So, you know, that's a heck of a difference.
Just, I don't mean to interrupt you, but for people that are newer to HR, can you clarify the difference between the CP and the SCP? So they know? Sure.
So your SCP practitioner is somebody who is already operating at a senior level in HR. They probably are a CHRO, director, senior director, VP, AVP, EVP, SVP, take your pick.
Gotcha.
Your CP is more likely to be perhaps a generalist. It may be somebody who is a subject matter expert in another domain already, like learning and development, talent acquisition, comp and bens, something like that. But the crucial difference is the material itself and also the level. So the SCP is geared to more strategic interventions, more process, more governance around strategy and execution. There's also a lot more in there around globalization and global organizations, which you actually see some of that at the CP level. So even though you may not be that well versed with union relations, industrial relations, things like that, or even things like corporate and social responsibility, it was interesting to see how much more of that is in there, which not everybody in their HR domain, or even if they're in HR in the first place, thinks, what's corporate and social responsibility got to do with HR? What's globalization got to do with HR? Now, obviously, something like employee relations, yes, but when it comes to all things union and collective bargaining and all those good things, then that opens up another whole chapter or two. So I think that's a crucial difference. And again, if you get the chance, if you do the online access, you can access that while you're accessing the other stuff. And if you want fun, you can do the practice exam, the practice test for SHRM SCP. But I haven't been brave enough to do that just yet. I'm still keeping my feet firmly on the ground.
Fun.
You want to have some fun.
Absolutely. But I think the real fun is when you do the practice. So at each section online, you get the chance to do a quiz. Now that quiz, it's the same as the practice questions, is great. Now it has a lot of retired exam questions. So this is what I mean about don't get yourself into that false sense of security about, oh, I've got this, I know this. Because the content that you see there, and SHRM has a big disclaimer, as Drew pointed out earlier, you know, the information that they have isn't necessarily going to be exactly the same as what you should expect to receive in the exam. But between the theory questions that are multiple choice and the situational questions, which I love, those are the ones that really get me thinking, because I'm like, well, what would I do in that situation? What would SHRM hope that I do in that situation? What would I really do in that situation? So you really do have to think, and you have to think on your feet, as well as what is best practice. And I think that's one of the things that SHRM encourages you to do. It's not always find the right answer, it's to find the best approach. And I think with the situational questions, it's a lot more geared around how would you approach that situation? Because you can look at those answers, and Drew and I have talked about this in the past, you see some of the answers like, well, they're all right, but they're all correct. But which is the best answer and why? And so I think in some of that, prevention is the best form of cure. And it encourages you to be more strategic and preventative in your planning and your execution. And I think that's the good thing about the online course. But don't ever get comfortable thinking, ah, awesome, I got this, I'm getting 100 all the time, because those questions are retired exam questions. And so you're not going to find a question that you just answered in there a month ago if you're doing the exam next month. So I think that's important. But again, practice, practice, practice. Even the things that you enjoy, you love the most or you hate the most, keep going, go back and back and back. And then you've got that memory mass up here, particularly in those areas that are not as familiar or as comfortable for you. Drew, how did you find that with the practice tests and the practice questions? Because I know you've always excelled at academic quizzes before. How did you find that differently this time around?
The practice tests were very frustrating, to be honest. Especially when you feel they did give you a false sense of security, especially when you went back to take the test at the end, saying, okay, I got this, and you take the test and you say, okay, I've got an 80%, and then you take the final test and you end up with a 60%. 80% is the threshold, and then you get to the end, you're like, oh man, I can't believe that I'm failing this. And you get closer and closer to the test date. And the worst part about it is the way that SHRM, I wish they would give you a score that says, hey, you passed, and here's how far ahead you are, because the score is 200. Am I correct? 200 is the correct is the score, but they don't tell you how close you are, how far past you are that you've gotten to 200. They just say, hey, you passed. If you failed, they tell you how far away you were from passing, but they never tell you how far ahead you are. So if you fail, and they tell you how. They never tell you what you have to do to get to that threshold. So it's scary. It's just totally scary, and I'm afraid that people. I really wish they had a better way of giving people more of a sense of security when they walk into that door. When I was done with the test, I was truly frightened because there were many questions that I really didn't know if I'd gotten correct. And so when I got the score at the end, I was like, well, wow, I can't believe I passed this thing. I was genuinely shocked.
It would be nice to know what you got correct.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Should we talk about the exam itself and what people might want to be aware of? Because I think if you read the SHRM website where they talk about the exam, I think the reality of the exam is quite different to perhaps what you might see online.
Real quick though, why don't you both tell us if you took the exam virtually or in person?
Absolutely. So, Drew?
I took it virtually with 3 different proctors.
With a proctor.
That's a whole interesting experience. Everybody has not done a remote proctored exam. It is a unique experience. So imagine going to the airport and getting stopped by TSA, and you get, for want of a better word, frisked and strip search. I mean, going to do remote proctored exams are no different. So from you having your slot and being free from noise and distraction to having great technology, the internet is not going to go down on you as you're busy doing all of this. You have to check in. It's a virtual check-in. A person, a greeter, will then take you through all of the security measures. So they'll want to be able to see your environment. They'll want to look at your keyboard. They'll want to look at your mouse. They'll want to see underneath your keyboard. They'll want to see behind your monitor and your screen, depending on what device you're using. If you're using a tablet, or if you're using a desktop, or if you're using a laptop, they'll want to see what's underneath your mouse. They'll want to see what's underneath your desk or table. They'll want to see the chair where you're sitting. They'll want to see underneath your chair. They'll want to see the top 4 corners of your room. They'll want you to scan all around your room to show them the whole layout. And they even ask if you have a mirror in there. It's incredible. So that was the first thing. So you get stressed when all that happens. It's just like going through airport security, and I don't enjoy that most times. The second thing is, once you've done all of that, then they'll remind you the instructions, and you're allowed 2 pieces of scratch paper. Fantastic. Okay, but here comes the crunch. You're not allowed a mechanical pencil. You're only allowed a basic traditional pencil. So if you don't have one, and I was having to search my drawers, and I found them since, but I couldn't find them at the time because I didn't realize they were buried at the back of my desk, you're only allowed a normal pencil to use to write notes. And then you have to show them the paper that you have and everything. So that's all before you even get started.
Okay.
Then when you get started, they remind you of the rules, they remind you of everything that happens. And then after that, they have to connect you with a live proctor. So you have to wait to check in, you go through the whole check-in process, and then they pass you on to somebody else. And then you get the chance to connect. So you do a little practice, you'll click here, click there, they'll take you through the screens, and then showtime. Are you ready? Get set, go, part one. And then of course, once you do part one, which is 80 questions, and Drew, remind me the time that you have to answer that first section. It's 2 hours?
I believe so. Did you take a break?
I did not take a break.
I took a break.
I'm hardcore. I didn't take a break. But you can take a break at the end of the first section. But if you do, then
you got to do it all over again.
Then you've got to start all over again. So they have you come back, and you've got to show them your mouse, your keyboard, underneath your desk, all that good stuff. You go through the same check-in procedures again, and then you get to start part two.
Don't forget, you have to check your back pockets as well.
Of course, yes. They want to know, they want you to turn out your pockets. So your front pockets, they want to see what you're wearing. They want to check you've got no hidden pockets.
Exactly.
And then
what if you're not wearing any pants? Then what?
I really don't know how to answer that.
But
I think at the time I had combat pants on, and they've got loads of pockets. I'm like, okay, which one do you want to start with? Okay, this one's empty. This one's empty. Oh, look, there's nothing in that one.
Yes, cargos, yes.
Man, and then if they're not happy with something, they'll have you repeat it until they're happy. So no two remote proctors are ever the same either. So somebody might have you do everything. Somebody might skip a bit. It's a strange, surreal.
Well, here's the thing, Jeremy, if I may interrupt. Here's the thing. I took the test a week and a half into the proctor. I was originally scheduled for a live session. Mine was canceled, so they were just getting started. And and I must say, in spite of the fact that it was rough, I got it accomplished. They did an okay job considering. So I'm sure, here it is, October when this is being taken care of, this being filmed. I think that they probably have everything ironed out by now. So I bet they have it covered.
Do you have the same proctor?
Until later.
I'm sorry,
Corey?
Do you have the same proctor the entire time when it's virtual?
No.
No. So you can have multiple people. So like with me, I was doing mine a week before the exam window closed because, take some time to prepare. My 3 months became 3 weeks. That was all my prep time.
Wow.
So then there's a lot of other people, and you can tell from the times that are available to test that there's a lot of people doing the test at that time. So I think you get to a point where the system just has a huge overload. And so for me, it stopped twice. I had internet connection, but it stopped twice. If you stop more than 2 times, they will stop the test completely. And then they'll tell you, you need to go to a live center to retest. So I was lucky, if you get a 3rd strike, you are out. So 2 strikes is all you can have. And if your technology isn't robust, or, you're sharing Wi-Fi in a house with a bunch of people, it can be sketchy. So bear that in mind. If you can ever get a wired connection and you can plug directly into a router, then that's a much better way of doing it if you're doing it remote. And that way, then you should have a great connection. But the other piece of this is that even when you finish the exam and you get completed, there's a series of things that you do at the end. You get a questionnaire about your experience, and then you'll get your results in an email to the original email address that you used to register, normally within about 15, 30 minutes of your test. And so you see this email arrive and you're like, do I open it? What time is it? Is it too early to have something a little bit more robust? So you sit and you wait and you open the email and then you see it and you're like, thank goodness. And this huge sense of relief and elation just washes over you, and you're like, and everybody in the family is like, how'd it go? I've been stressing out about it for weeks. I'm like, I passed. And so all those hours, all those late nights, all those burning the midnight oil sessions were worth it. But I can tell you the relief that you get in that email is just immense. But then the challenge is, what do I have to do for recertification? And so what do I need to be working on for the next 3 years so I never have to do this exam again? Right, Drew?
You know, a couple things that we haven't touched on. We did mention talking about taking the practice test. When you had the books, did you get the flashcards as well?
No, I did not, but you do get the flashcards with the online package.
Yes, I cannot recommend those high enough. Those help me so much. Use the flashcards, use them, abuse them, get your friends to call those out to you. Those were invaluable to me. And those questions come up over and over and over again, especially the laws. And
you get them separately, Drew?
Well, actually, they come up online. They give you an opportunity to print them, and there are hundreds of them, but they come in so handy. So please, when you get the opportunity to download them, use them. They really come in handy. Oh man, late nights. How about late nights? I deal them out like playing cards.
Flashcards are helpful. I always use flashcards for anything. They help you memorize things. Those trees did not get saved. Sorry. What else did you not get to touch on?
The practice tests. Take them over and over and over again. I've complained about the practice tests not helping, but they're little kernels. Sometimes the way that the tests, the questions were written, you'll see a pattern. Certain words that keep showing up in certain questions. You'll notice a pattern in the next section. That same word will show up, and you're saying, if you just notice this particular word, that's the way the question should be answered. You'll see it the same way in certain situations. That's what they're looking for.
Okay, good. That's helpful.
There's one more piece I would add, on the exam, which when you're clicking through, you can go as quickly or as slowly back and forth as you want with those questions. And so a lot of times, you might get a question you're like, oh, I really don't know. I can't think of the answer for that right now. Or you can leave that right there and advance to the next one or however many you want to do. And it's going to show you a little display on your screen. It's going to show you 40 on a screen at a time. So you can see if there's any that you've missed, or if you want to flag them to go back to it later. And I did that in both sections, and I found it was helpful because there was a couple of times I wasn't sure about my answer, or is that my best answer? I'm going to pick something for now. It's the first thing that comes into my mind, but I'm going to go back to it. And so by the time you're getting towards the end of a section, you can navigate straight back to it. And then even before you finish the section, and if you've still got flags in there, it'll tell you, it'll prompt you and remind you, hey, you flagged this before, or did you mean to skip that question? And so that's a good what I like about the Prometric tool is that that's available. So it does give you a visual guide. So if ever you feel, I'm not sure, I'm not clear, then you get the chance to go back. And I think that's a really good benefit because otherwise, you will find yourself going back and forth as you deliberate or reconsider your answer. I wish all online exams were like that. I thought that was a really good feature.
The other thing I was going to bring up earlier is that if you feel like you cannot afford the test prep, number one, it's tax deductible. Number two, if you have a really, really nice employer like I did, they'll pay for it, and it's tax deductible for them. So think about that as well. If you go to your employer and say, pay for this for me, and maybe they can take care of it for you.
It doesn't hurt to ask, and I think a lot of people may not know it's tax deductible, so that's really helpful to know.
It is.
Yeah.
What did you find to be not so helpful? Like something you would tell someone, no need to do that you did? Or was there anything?
Quit worrying so much about it. If you know the answers, take a deep breath and move on. I went crazy over the flashcards, as I said. I kept saying, okay, do this, do this, do this. If you know it, move on.
Don't overanalyze your answers.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Don't overanalyze your answers.
Exactly. That and I am over analytical, and I really should have walked away from it, but I probably drove my family crazy with those flashcards. And when I took the test, I probably did the best on those rote answers. because I went, yes, I know Roe v. Wade. I know these, I can tell you everything about unions and all those laws, but it was the situational questions that I had more difficulty with. But anything that was concrete, I was in, and I should have just walked away and spent more time with the situational questions than anything else. Just take a breath. That's what I would recommend.
That's good advice. I think with the theory and the questions where you need to elicit your knowledge and your representation of the body of knowledge, that's important. With the situational questions, it is harder to prepare for those. So if you're part of a SHRM chapter, or if you're connected to others, whether you're sitting in a HR function or not, there are other people out there that can help you. And I think with the situational questions, there are multiple ways to answer that sometimes, other than trying to espouse the SHRM best practice. And one thing I would tell you not to do is to ignore that network. I mean, LinkedIn is a great tool. Find people that are involved in your chapter. If you're not a member of a chapter, there may not be a chapter locally. We'll reach out to one that's nearest to you. Ultimately, SHRM people want to help SHRM people, because the more we expand, the more that we bring in new people, the more that we encourage people to learn the knowledge, the more we help everybody do better. And so I think don't struggle with the situational stuff, and don't ignore that, because the application of the knowledge and the application of the theory, particularly in the situational questions, is just as important as knowing the right answer to the others. So don't ignore who you know, even if they've never done a SHRM exam, but they've worked in HR for a while. Sometimes it may be a non-HR person. It might be a CEO, it might be a CFO, it might be an owner. But somebody that might be able to give you some good advice. And even if they're not a SHRM member, maybe they had membership in the past. And I think it's good to utilize your network. I'm blessed with having a good network. Doesn't mean that everybody came back to me with an answer to my silly questions sometimes, but at the same time, I think it's important to use your network to your advantage. And at the same time, even if you do feel comfortable, I know it, have that second mind to go back every once in a while and just take a checkpoint again. Because for me, in my domain, there were things that I had overlooked before, and sometimes it was something as simple as their preferred expression for that was this, whereas I prefer to say it like this or that. And the right answer is this one, and I was focusing over here. But practice makes perfect. Even when you do the practice exam, I mean, you can do, as Drew said, you can do great with the practice tests, but the practice exam really does stretch you. And the more times that you can do it, the more times you get used to timing yourself in terms of how long do I need to spend on this question? How much time have I got? Because with 80 questions in section 1 and 80 questions in section 2, you've got to plan your time carefully, especially to go back and check things and then to move forward. So practice makes perfect. Don't leave it till the last minute. Even if you haven't done every piece of the body of knowledge, from motivational theories to leadership theories to employment law. And if you count up all the employment laws that are contained within the SHRM body of knowledge, and if you can learn most of them, you've done very well. That's for certain. And don't think that you're going to come away from this knowing everything. Because even today, the domains that I didn't score as well in, I still go back to at least once a week, and I punish myself to read the material again. And I'll even do the practice piece again, just to get it in here. So that if I ever have to do this again and I don't recertify, then I know what I need to know on top of what I know today.
You need a life, dude.
Arguably, my kids would agree.
So, real quick, well, I kind of want to ask you, realistically, how much time would you say someone needs to plan ahead to prepare for this test? Because I think that a lot of people simply don't take it because it is time they feel like they don't have. They don't know how much time to plan for in advance. So looking back, did you have enough time, or do you wish you had had more time? Like, what would you tell someone? Make sure you have this amount of time to prepare. Drew, you can go first.
I took too much time.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I said you can go.
I'm sorry I interrupted.
That's okay.
I took too much time. We were all basically grounded because of COVID. I took way too much time. I decided to do it, and then I took too much time to prep, too much time to do it all. I think the first thing you have to do is make the decision to actually do it. If you decide to buy the prep, there's a calendar that says, I want to take it on this day, and it actually gives you a time frame. So, okay, you have this much time to take that to work on this section, this section, this section, and it gives you a countdown. I personally think a month is plenty of time.
Okay.
I took 3.5 months because I procrastinated. I was lazy, so I spread it out. But then then I finally decided, I moved it up and said, okay, I'm going to do this. A month is plenty of time.
Okay.
A month.
I know.
Jeremy, do you agree with that?
Jeremy took 3 weeks, right?
I originally planned 3 months.
Okay.
A proper prep. It didn't happen because I was reading the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
And I decided to start off with the employment law, and it bored me incessantly. So I couldn't get past that. And so then I parked it, and then I realized, because once you book your exam date, you know how much time you've got between now and then. But even still, if you bought the books, some of those books are really thin, some of those books are really thick. How much time do you therefore need? Because some of the thinner books take as much time if you've never covered some of that subject matter before.
Right.
Different theories of leadership, different motivation theories, etc., etc. So realistically, I did do it in 3 weeks in the end, but it was every day in those 3 weeks that I was having to do something. So in some sections, if you go online, it takes you a whole bunch of time to get from section to section to section. And for some sections, there may be 20 plus sections there. So you've got to pace yourself. So my advice is find your pace that works for you. But remember, you can go through it too quickly and not retain the knowledge, or get enough value from it, in which case you may have to repeat it. So plan your time, find what works for you. If you're better doing it in the morning, you can do it during your lunch break, during work. If you're better doing it in the evening, find what works for you, and then put some extra time in. So if you've got some extra time on the weekend, do it. Because I can tell you, when you come to do the practice exam is done in the same time that you would have to do the real exam. When you do the practice quizzes take as much time as you take to do it. So find what's comfortable for you. I did it in 3 weeks, but it was the most painful 3 weeks that I've had in a long time, other than in doing master's finals. So I promised myself I would never do it again. Like I said before, I used to have hair, but because you're doing this all the time, when you're kind of scratching your head and you're like, why did I only get 60 in that one? I know that one really well. And so on and so on. So if you value your hairline and you value your follicles, put some time in.
Well, I think that these are all really good suggestions, and I even learned a lot, so that's good, even after we already talked before this. So anything else you both want to add before we wrap things up here?
Well, I think I'm good. It's always a pleasure to see you, Jeremy.
Absolutely. You too, Drew. Drew and I both did our masters together and learned all about human resource development together, which was a fascinating experience and prepared us well for going down the SHRM route. But what I would say is it is a unique experience to do the SHRM exam. And even if you don't pass the first time, you will get knowledge from it that's beneficial, and don't be put off. I know people that fail first time around. I know people that fail second time around. Keep going, you'll get there. The last thing I want to say is have some fun. You know, test people that you work with. If you work in HR, ask them some of the questions, and then they'll be like, well, surely it's this. I mean, use that as much as you can. You've got a network for a reason. But whoever does this next, good luck to you. Study well, enjoy it. It's definitely a once in a lifetime experience, but remember, recertification.